Hi, everyone. As we roll through battle after battle of the Civil War, I think it's sometimes necessary for us to take a step back and review some of the personalities that we've been introduced to. And so today, the big purpose here is to review some of your essential Civil War vocabulary, as well as these different leaders of the country, both North and South, two different countries during the Civil War. And so I want to go through a couple of these with you. I do not believe I need to say much about Abraham Lincoln. Obviously, the 16th president of our country. One other thing here that I do want to make sure to point out is at the beginning of the Civil War, he's trying to step on eggshells and be very careful with every single move he makes because he does not want to offend those border states. He does not want to have to fight a war against 15 slave states. The second character here, a lot less known, is Robert Anderson. He is the Union defender, the Union major in charge of Fort Sumter. And so in that first battle, he tries to hold out against PGT Beauregard. Our third one here is Ulysses S. Grant. Ulysses S. Grant had been involved in the military for a long, long time, but he was dismissed for his drinking. Eventually, he has to earn his way back up, and he does so in the Battle of Shiloh, as well as some other different battles that happened towards the Western theater of the Civil War at the beginning. George McClellan. He is the second commander of the Union forces after Whitfield Scott. He comes in with full confidence. Everybody believes in him, but he does not launch any kind of invasion to the South. He does not attack for 9 months. We're going to find out next week about his first big attack into the South, but altogether seemed to be very confident in himself, not necessarily so confident in his soldiers. William Tecumseh Sherman. He ends up becoming Ulysses S. Grant's second in command. He becomes somebody that Grant truly trusts. During Shiloh, he's going to fight, and he's going to show himself. Ulysses S. Grant is going to show what he's really made of. But William Tecumseh Sherman going to be a huge Union character that comes in later down the road. Whitfield Scott is that first commander for Abraham Lincoln in the Union Army, but he can't be in the battlefield. He's got so many different health issues. He's also he's kind of overweight. He's 75 years old, but he can't be there right when the Union needs him. And so eventually he retires from the service in November of 1861, the first year of the war. Now, we turn to the Confederate side now. Jefferson Davis. I have not introduced you to him, at least not nearly well enough, but Jefferson Davis is the Confederate president. He was selected because he was a Mississippi senator and someone that was a pretty prominent character in Southern politics before the Civil War. But he is appointed the position of being the Confederate president and then later also elected in that first year of the war to be the Confederate president. He's got a pretty good political background. He's also a very orderly person, and so he seemed like a fairly decent pick. And the state of Mississippi was a very pro-Southern state at the beginning, and so it selected its senator to be the overall president of the country. Now, we move on to the first commander of the Confederate forces. It's Joseph Johnston. Joseph Johnston had a pretty high rank when he was in the Union Army. So when he defected and went to the South, he was selected to be their first commander. The only problem is he ends up getting injured in 1862. We're going to learn about that on Monday of next week. He ends up getting injured, which opens the door for Robert E. Lee. But Joseph Johnston was the first Confederate overall commander, the top general leading their forces at the start of the war. PGT Beauregard was the Confederate attacker and Confederate leader in charge of Charleston, South Carolina. He's the one attacking Major Robert Anderson at Fort Sumter in Charleston. And also, he's the one that sets up the troops for the Confederacy at the first Bull Run. So when they were getting attacked and he had all the crossings of the creek covered, it's him who sets up that plan, and he does a very good job, but he also does a very poor job in the Battle of Shiloh. He should have pursued Ulysses S. Grant, but he chose not to because he thought the soldiers were pretty tired and the nighttime was coming. So dusk was falling and he decided not to attack. So he made a terrible, terrible mistake at Shiloh. But before that, he did some fantastic things for the Confederacy. Robert E. Lee, someone we really didn't get introduced to yet because at this point in the war, he's just sitting behind a desk and guiding different appointments and operations for the Confederacy. But he's going to end up being called upon to be the commander of the Confederacy in the second year of the war. Stonewall Jackson, great hero for the Confederacy, someone that was the absolute hero of the first Bull Run, and you're going to hear his tale many, many times in the future here until he ends up passing away in the middle of the war. But Stonewall Jackson, great Confederate hero from the first Bull Run. Albert Sidney Johnston, no relation to Joseph Johnston. He is a commander in the West for the Confederacy, and the Confederacy and the president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, really believe in him. The only thing is, at Shiloh, he gets shot in the back of the knee. That bullet goes through an artery, and he ends up bleeding out to death on that field. So he dies at the Battle of Shiloh, and he is the highest ranking general ever to be killed in any battle of the entire Civil War. Now, to practice your knowledge, make sure to look at the Quizlet flashcards and also play the Quizlet match game. You can see them on these links right here. And then before the day is done or before the week is over, make sure to play the quizzes game that includes the essential Civil War vocabulary as well as the information upon these leaders. If you want to play it multiple times, do so. I'd be super happy to see every single person get 100%. So please go at it, enjoy, and have a great week, and also have a great weekend.